Hello. I've always naturally been what could be classified as a shy person, in that I generally enjoy lots of time on my own and quiet time. And when I'm in social situations, I'm generally happy to let other people do the talking and interacting. And while I just listen, and I only interject something if I feel like I have something especially interesting to say. And even when I try to make a big effort at like a party and try to be outgoing and talkative, those always feel like the moments when someone will turn to me and say, "Oh, you're shy. Aren't you the quiet one?" Which can be so frustrating. Has that happened to anyone else? Because it feels like I'm really trying, but I'm obviously still coming across as like a shy and reserved person. So it feels almost ironic that as I've done more bookish stuff online, I've started being invited to book events in recent years. And often these will be events where I don't know anyone there. So it can be quite nerve wracking for me as a shy person to walk into a room where I don't know anybody, and to try to start to make conversation with entirely new people. And but I think it's been quite good for me, and it's like pushed me outside my comfort zone. And I think I've got slightly better at it at recent years. So, for instance, I went to a book event recently where I didn't know anyone there, and I walked into the room and I got a drink and was standing at the side, and I saw a woman also standing at the side, sort of looking around and like pensively looking at her phone, and so I thought, oh, I'll go and introduce myself and start chatting with her. And so we had a discussion, a really lovely chat about the books surrounding the event we went to, and reading in general, and our lives, and had a really lovely conversation. And at the end, before we parted, and as the event was ending, she turned to me and said, "Oh, thank you for talking to me." And that just kind of broke my heart a bit, because like I know how much I appreciate it when I go to events and someone, makes the effort to try to speak to me, especially if I don't speak to, aren't talking to anyone else. Because there have been occasions, yeah, where I've gone to events and I've just sort of stood there the entire time, like tried to get into a group and a conversation, but it hasn't really worked, and it can be quite awkward. And so I can think back on times in my life where people in occasions like this have like reached out to me. And I remember on one occasion specifically, like when I went to a pub and was brought there by my husband, and but I didn't know anybody else there, and he was off talking with other people. So I just sort of sat there and was sat at a table, and a woman like actively reached across the table and took my hand and just started talking to me in a very like comfortable and friendly way. And we had a wonderful chat, and it was just such a great like moment of connection that I really valued. And so yeah, I can think of a number of people on occasions like this. Sometimes I never see them again, but I really remember them very fondly, because of making that effort, and taking the time to reach out and speak to me on an occasion where I felt quite awkward and isolated, because when you're a shy person, you feel that isolation even more intensely when in big groups like this. And this is all a way of leading up to talk about a novel I just read called Shy Creatures by Clare Chambers. And this novel depicts a number of quite shy and awkward people, but also some really wonderful individuals. So at the partly at the center of the book is a woman named Helen, who works as an art therapist at a psychiatric hospital in a suburb of London in 1964. That's when the story begins, and she is just one of these like really warm people that really cares about reaching out to people that are struggling like this. And she encounters a case of someone who is so intensely reserved and shy and has been sheltered for many, many years. So she and a doctor at the hospital, who she is having a complicated affair with because he is married. So Helen and Dr. Gill, they are called out to this house where police have investigated a disruption that was reported by neighbors, where they heard a ruckus going on. So they went into the house and they found in this house a elderly lady and a man who has long hair and long beard because he has been shut up in this house for many, many years, and his neighbors didn't even know that he was there or that he existed, and he's not talking. And so they take in this elderly lady and this man who is so intensely reserved, and they take him to the psychiatric hospital because they don't know what else to do with him. And so the story follows the gradual unraveling of the mystery of why was this man in this situation? How did he get here? And it kind of tunnels back through the years of his life of living in intense isolation in this household for decades. And it turns out he's 37 years old, and so he's been in this house ever since he was a child, basically. And so there is a really intriguing mystery and backstory behind it, but it's so beautiful how it portrays this relationship as Helen reaches out to this man who's been isolated for so long, who's named William, and who has a natural artistic ability. And since she is an art therapist, she naturally tries to foster his abilities, but also tries to uncover the mystery of his past and to try to help draw him out into the world and become more social. And so it's really touching following their interactions, their very hesitant interactions with each other, and William gradually coming out of his shell. But there's also, excuse me, sorry, I needed to have a sup of tea because my voice was going croaky. And see, this is what happens when someone who doesn't speak very much starts speaking. Then it becomes actually difficult to talk. Anyway, as I was trying to start saying, there's also another character named Marion, who's a very maternal woman, but also very just warm and really connects with people and sees people, I think, for who they are, and tries to reach out to other people. And she is the mother of William's childhood friend, Francis, who Helen helps them reconnect after having been separated for a very long time. And Marion is just a wonderful character, and just so warm and really wonderful in reaching out to William. And so it's so touching following this backstory, but also really beautiful how Clare Chambers describes his artistic abilities and a very special way of seeing the world, but also how she presents this very claustrophobic environment that William has grown up with throughout for many decades, that in some ways has been very nurturing and wonderful for him, but also entirely sheltered him from the world, and how she describes all of the objects in this house very vividly, and the whole environment of it. So he's basically lived with some old aunties for a really long time, and we follow him in his routines, and how and I think it's so clever how Chambers depicts this sense of, when someone has been isolated for a really long time, they can develop routines of their own, which if those routines are disrupted, then it can be very alarming for that individual. And so how she depicts that in regards to William, I think is so touching, and especially showing moments in over the decades when he has, out of necessity, often like had to leave the house or go outside of the house, partly, and just what a massive event this is, and how she forms this sense of it being such a big, huge event in William's life when he actually steps out and interacts with someone, and how when those interactions occur, it sticks in his memory so much, and that he'll like pore over it again and again and be so anxious about how those interactions went. And it's really touching that there's a object that he holds on to, which he's carried throughout his life since he was his childhood, when he was given it at when he went over to a friend's house, and it was something that he was just supposed to use and then give back, but he mistakenly thought that he was supposed to keep it, and he's like had this guilt over all of these years about holding on to this object and been so anxious about this, when really it wasn't a big thing at all. And so, when someone is sequestered on their own, I think certain things from the past and events and interactions can just build up so much meaning in somebody's memory, and can come be this big thing in their mind that they can't get over. And I think it's so clever how Chambers depicts that in this novel, that it felt very true to life and real. And there's also another character named Lorraine, who's a relative, a much younger relative of Helen's, who is also a very shy and reserved individual, who is finding it difficult to negotiate her way in the world. And it's really meaningful and beautiful how she depicts that as well, especially when an older man starts reaching out to her, and she starts having romantic designs on him. And I think it's very easy to become sort of infatuated for someone who is slightly more reserved, when someone is showing an interest in them, that those feelings and those interactions can be confused with more romantic sensations, and I think it's really moving how she depicts that as well, and how on the part of the person who is reaching out, they can be slightly taking advantage of that situation, even if not in a very sinister way, but more as a way of like stroking their own ego, that someone has become infatuated with them, and that they realize that this is someone who doesn't have many interactions with other people, and so can take that as a kind of thing. It's a kind of like power play, isn't it? And so Clare Chambers depicts all these really interesting relationships, I think in a very tender and meaningful way, especially around a number of individuals who are very shy and reserved, and I found it so powerful and moving following this story as the mystery of William is uncovered, and I didn't suspect at all what was going to happen. I'm not going to give anything away, but it was a big surprise to me, and really powerful how this novel ultimately ends, which I was so glad about, and because I was quite nervous going into reading this book, because I had read Clare Chambers' previous novel called Small Pleasures, which 99% of that novel I loved and thought was so beautifully rendered. But the very end of that book, literally the final like 2 or 3 pages, I thought were so frustrating, that it kind of ruined the whole experience for me. So I was quite nervous going into reading this that I might have the same thing. But I want to say that I did not have that experience with this novel, and I found it really beautiful and satisfying how it ends, and but also following the whole journey of these characters, and also like how it looks at larger things of of sort of psychiatric hospitals and people who are labeled crazy, and kind of the stigma around people who are different from the norm, especially like in social situations. And so Dr. Gill, in a lot of ways, he's quite a progressive doctor. He's like questioning well, do the patients here actually have a mental illness, or are they just quite different from other people? And can we help them adjust to larger society when a lot of people and historically, when people who have been labeled crazy have just been sort of locked up and then like left away, can they be reintegrated into larger society? And so it's interesting how it follows all of these like social issues as well. And this was I think a time in the country when there were slightly more progressive ideas emerging in regards to mental health and psychiatric hospitals. So it was really interesting following that as well. And there's a quote in the book that I really loved, that I just really stuck out for me, where it says, "For quiet people, raised voices are experienced as a kind of aggression, even when directed elsewhere." and that is like definitely true for me. Like as a quiet person, if I overhear an argument or something, it can be like quite like upsetting, and I can almost like take it like really personal, even though I'm have nothing to do with the situation. But I find those situations really upsetting. So there's lots of really wonderful observations in the novel like this about the nature of people who are more naturally shy, and how they go about negotiating being in the world. So I thought this was a really beautiful story. Also, a really great cover, and I have this special edition that has these beautiful sprayed edges to it, which is so beautiful, depicting sort of flowers and scenes of nature, which William, the artist in the story, he renders in his drawings a lot. So I loved reading this. So it'd be great to hear if you're interested in reading it as well, or if you have read this novel and want to discuss it with me in the comments below, or if you just want to chat about the experience of being a naturally shy and quiet person, because it's definitely something that I can relate to, and that I've lived with for a really long time. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.